All right, my friends, so before we jump into the 7 Steps course, I want to give you a little bonus gift, and it is this training you're watching right now. I didn't mention this anywhere. You did not hear about this until you purchased, and this is just my way of saying thank you for being a customer. Thank you for enrolling. I'm just so happy to have you here. So let's dive into this bonus training, which is entitled How to Find Your Unique Sound. Now, there's a well-known quote from an artist named Pablo Picasso. You may have heard the name before, and the quote goes like this: "Good artists copy, great artists steal." Now, as with any 6-word maxim, it's very generalized, right? And it does lack some nuance, but I believe there is still real truth here. In essence, here's what the quote means. Artists who copy other artists are focused on sounding like a singular influence. For example, that would be like me trying to sound exactly like Coldplay or trying to make a song exactly like a Coldplay song. Conversely, artists who steal from other artists are more sophisticated in their approach than those who copy. They incorporate multiple influences, they mix it up, and then they create their own customized style as a result. See, the reality is you are going to steal from your influences whether you like it or not. Like, that's inescapable. If you only listen to American and European music growing up, inevitably what you create is going to sound like Western, American, European music. So maybe it's your prerogative to not feel guilty for stealing the chord progression from a song that you like, right? Because the reality is you are going to steal. You've unconsciously internalized countless musical approaches and ways of doing things. So why not allow that to also be a conscious process? Now, of course, you want to be smart with this idea. Don't steal or don't copy in a way that makes it obvious or creates any type of copyright infringement. And also, don't copy the entirety of the song, because that is the distinction I'm making here is good artists copy. They just try to do exactly what another song does, but great artists will steal, meaning they will take a snippet from this song, an idea from over here, an idea from this completely unrelated genre over here, and they'll blend it together and make it their own piece of work. That is the smart way to approach it. But don't abandon inspiration. Don't abandon influence. And in fact, I would say embrace your influences and make it a game. Go create a song where you intentionally combine the qualities of different artists. So for example, I could steal the chord progression from Billie Eilish. I could steal the arrangement for my song from Tame Impala. Then I could go steal the vocal processing from like a Lainey song. And if I were to put all that together, chances are people would be inclined to think that it sounds new and different. And that's because it probably does sound new and different. See, you don't have to solely rely on your internal self to be creative. There is nothing wrong, and in fact, it is encouraged to learn and embrace your influences, and then sort of approach this like a scientist would, and leverage elements that already exist, and then try different concoctions, different formulas. And when you do that, you'll inevitably find a unique sound that nobody will realize what you've just done. They won't connect the dots. They won't see underneath what is happening, but you do. And I think this is 100% a smart way of making music. I'm not talking about reference tracks here. I'm not talking about, again, copying one particular song or even one particular artist, but rather we're talking about how can we leverage elements that already exist and then, like a scientist, combine them, mix them up, use a dab of this, a dab of that, and create our own sound as a result. This is what it means to not just copy like a good artist does, but steal like a great artist does. All right, now before we wrap this up, I just want to give you a little homework to do, and it's very, very short, so don't worry, this is only going to take a couple minutes, and I'm going to call this the influence triangle, and it's your influence triangle. Now, this concept was partially inspired by Leah McHenry from Savvy Musician Academy. She would call it your micro niche, although the influence triangle isn't precisely the same thing, but they do overlap. And so I did want to give credit to Leah and the great work she's done over at Savvy Musician Academy. And we will also talk about your micro niche as a short final step to this. So what we want to do here is figure out what is your influence triangle. So go grab a pen and paper, or just the notes app on your phone, and I want you to write down 3 of your top musical influences. Now, the purpose for this is to see if you can bring some clarity to yourself for how you might want to approach your specific sound going forward. For example, my three influences in my influence triangle, I would say, are Coldplay, the 1975, and Andrew Bell. So what are those for you? Go ahead, write those down. Just write down a few of your top influences over the years. And feel free to take your time with this. You can do this as quickly as you want, or you can just really think about it, go through your Spotify, do all that stuff, and make a list. You can, if 3 is too small of a number, by the way, you can go ahead and make this list 5, 10, 15, even 20 artists and bands that have influenced you the most. And then just eventually narrow it down to what you feel like are your top 3, because I do encourage you to narrow it down eventually to just 3 influences. Now, an important side note here that I'll mention is you can approach this through the lens of what you want to sound like in the future. So by all means, you can include an artist in your influence triangle who you've just discovered in the past year or two, right? This doesn't have to be long-time influences from your childhood. Often that will be the case, but it doesn't have to be. You can 100% use an artist that you've recently discovered that you just really have been inspired by. So now, once your influence triangle has been written out, here is how this can really help you. This will help you because now you can start writing and creating songs that intentionally combine different components of all 3 of your influences in your triangle. For example, since my 3 influences are Coldplay, the 1975, and Andrew Bell, that could look like using a chord progression and tempo inspired by a Coldplay song, and then using a vocal processing and lyrical style inspired by a 1975 song. And then I could use like an ambient pop production style inspired by an Andrew Bell song. This is all about discovering your specific sound. And so there's one more step that I want to take. Now that you have your influence triangle, now that you have those 3 artists written down, what I want you to do now is take a step back and really look at those 3 artists, and then ask yourself the question, what would I call the sound if I combined these 3 influences? And this is where the term micro niche comes in, as Leah McHenry calls it. So for example, me personally, with my 3 influences of Coldplay, the 1975, and Andrew Bell, I would say my micro niche is something along the lines of ambient alt pop. So now it's your turn. Like when you look at your influence triangle, is there a title, is there a name that you could give your sound that isn't completely obscure, right? You want this sound to already exist in some form, but it doesn't have to be a huge niche. It can be a small niche. For example, it might sound something like psychedelic indie folk, or euphoric pop rock, or ethereal indie pop, right? It's this combination that is much more niched down than, say, just indie pop or indie rock or folk, right? And you could even take this farther, and you could go all the way to something like coffee shop indie, right? A good marker for whether or not your micro niche makes sense is, are there playlists on Spotify with that niche? And coffee shop indie absolutely checks that box. Now, you could also apply this to, say, college party electronic or road trip indie rock. And there's actually, by the way, a popular Spotify playlist with this exact name. The final goal then of narrowing down your influence triangle and your micro niche is now you have a path forward for your music and for your sound, because now you can become one of the top dogs in that little corner, in that little niche in the music realm. And there's a Pat Flynn quote, I believe it was Pat Flynn, who really coined the phrase, riches are in the niches. So embrace your micro niche or micro niche, and then go and really use that as inspiration, use that as fuel, and see if you can start to create your unique identity based on not just you, because that can be such a complicated process to figure out, who you are without your external influences. But rather, in order to bring some clarity to what you want to sound like, leverage your influences, leverage the artists that have inspired you, and then, like a great artist, steal, but do it diligently. Do it in a way that actually is creative, that actually creates something new and different. And it's not by copying an artist, but rather it's by stealing bits and pieces from different places and then combining it and making it your own. So My friend, I would love to know who is in your influence triangle. So just leave a comment below and let me know. And also, if you have ideas for how you could give your sound a specific micro niche name, like we talked about, like coffee shop indie or road trip indie rock, or one of those very specific names, you could think of this too as like an elevator pitch for your music. If someone asks you, what kind of music do you make? It's kind of a cool thing if you could make it that specific, right? I think that could very much leave an impression on people you talk to if you say, yeah, it's like indie music that you hear in coffee shops, or it's the type of music that is specific to like college parties, right? It's very specific. So once again, leave a comment below. Let me know who your 3 artists are in your influence triangle. And also if you have any ideas for how you might want to name your micro niche, also leave a comment and let me know about that. So there it is, my friend. That is just a few insights for how you can go about discovering your unique sound and making the most of what you have and actually leveraging your influences so that you can create a sound that not only you like, but is also new, but also relevant, because you aren't creating something completely out of nothing. You are using elements that already exist and you're combining them in a way that is brand new. So there you go, my friend. That is my bonus gift for joining the course. I hope you found it deeply valuable. Thank you again for joining. Thank you again for watching. Now go ahead, dive into the 7 Steps course, and I will see you there.